Good morning, Keith Tebow with you today. Time to get an update from one of our state legislators on Beacon Hill. I'm pleased to be joined by State Representative Carole Fiola. Representative Fiola, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me, Keith. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it's been a while since.
I think of this as coffee and conversation with Carole. I host a lot of those, so I kind of feel like we're in one right now.
There you go. It is the morning as we're recording this. Since last we spoke, you've received a chairmanship, if you will, on the House side. You are the House Chair of the Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development Committee. Talk about what that means for you and what it means in terms of your role, serving Fall River and the South Coast.
Thanks, Keith. Well, I was very honored that the Speaker asked me to do so, to chair this committee on the House side. And tourism, arts, and cultural development, we all know are important. However, the pandemic has shined a different light on it. It was pretty much the first industry to be shut down with the pandemic. It was rapidly shut down. Obviously, people were not going to live events. They were not going to venues. They were not, participating in musical venues, etc., and going to restaurants. And so it was the first to shut down, and it will prove to be, in the long run, one of the last to fully open. And so having been asked to chair this committee normally would be just really a fun time to really get out and highlight what's happening around the Commonwealth and look at what's needed to support the tourism, arts, and cultural development. But this time, there's a bigger sense of urgency to help this industry and work with them to figure out what they need from us in the legislature to move forward. In a couple of ways. One is through the bills that get filed, and those have been filed and will be sitting in our committee, and we'll be having hearings on the bills that get filed that legislators felt were important to the industry. But in addition, I serve on a couple of commissions in my role as chair. And the first thing we did in my committee, and along with the Senate chair, Senator Ed Kennedy, is we came up with an idea. I thought it would be really helpful to hear from the industry right at the beginning of the session. And so last week, we hosted an industry impact hearing and invited industry leaders that represented a variety of the tourism, arts, and cultural areas. We invited from the arts, the humanities, conventions, Massport, every kind of industry you could imagine. We had 5 panels of participants who really painted a grim picture of what their industry's been through and talked about some of the things that they're going to need to move forward.
Yeah, I know you said that, this will probably be one of the last industries to come back. And, in terms of Fall River specific, prior to the pandemic, the city has made some inroads, right, in terms of arts and culture, in terms of, the waterfront arts overlay district and the like. How do you foresee your role in helping, Fall River specifically to broaden its reach in arts and culture as well as tourism?
So first of all, you're right. Here locally, we've been blessed. There's been a renewed energy behind arts and culture, because I think the business community, along with the arts and culture organizations, have understood that tourism, arts, and culture is an economic development piece, a very important one, especially as you mentioned, we're getting that waterfront prepped and primed. We got the Vietnam Memorial Wall ready to go. May 15th launch. That's going to be amazing. If you haven't been down there, check it out. On the other side, we've got the Battleship, which we all cannot imagine what our life would be without the Battleship to look at and to participate and to visit. So I'd like to talk about that for a minute, in a minute. But so my role will be to, it's really exciting because we're able to already make an impact, because our budget the governor put his budget out in January as required by statute. The House is next, and by statute, and we put our budget out last week. And normally in that budget, for example, on the cultural end, we would be fighting for extra dollars to the House leadership. But in my meetings with him, made it clear of what we've been hearing and what we've been seeing, and the budget from the House side fully funded what was requested from the arts and culture industry. And that's a first. That's really, really important. So I feel like, we're responding to the industry needs. And I look forward to continuing that in my role on this committee. We know that there are some pieces of this industry that right now are still a bit confused. We know that the governor, the administration, has a reopening committee, and they're charged, and the legislature, through the emergency order of the pandemic, gave the governor full, right to deal with this pandemic as he sees fit. And for the most part, it's gone pretty well. It's been frustrating for many, but the segments of this tourism, arts, and culture industry, like the music venues, like the wedding venues, and live entertainment, that are saying, "Hey, you're opening up a lot of the economy, this economy, but we're still left behind." And so we're working through some of those issues with how people respond to the live music, the wedding venues. They're very limited to the 100 people, regardless of how many people they can comfortably and safely and social distancely, if that's a word, fit in their venue. So we're working hard to communicate with the administration their concerns. So it's an honor, and it's one that, I'm learning something new every day. Meeting people I never imagined, learning about industries, and so it's a privilege.
You wanted to mention a little more about the Battleship and its impact in Fall River. The only reason why I know about the history of the Battleship was it arrived the same year I was born, mid-60s. So it's really been an important institution in Fall River, and I know they've been struggling as well.
Well, of course, think about it. They are dependent upon revenues from ticket sales. But, it's funny, a couple of points. So we've been very supportive with them in the budget, trying to ensure that they get some funding, to support and supplement what they do. Just this week, we were able to go to a dedication of some historic remains from PT 59. And if you don't know what PT 59 was, it was a gunboat. It was converted to a gunboat that then Lieutenant John F. Kennedy served at the helm of. And, there were some very heroic acts on that boat. And think about it, 1942, it was launched right down the road, 12 miles at Melville, Rhode Island, the base there. Mm-hmm. And now, 80 years later, those remains that were found in the Harlem River, because this boat was sunk, those remains now are 12 miles away at Battleship Cove to be displayed, for history. And it's really important that we preserve history so that we can understand where we were to know where we are now. And I really learned a lot in preparing to go to that dedication. And I always thought of President Kennedy. He got his cake here in Fall River for his wedding to Jackie O, to Jacqueline Bouvier. And, all of us know that, and we take some pride in that. He was married just down the road at Hammersmith Farm, and we know him as the president, certainly that had some groundbreaking, his tenure was groundbreaking, but he was a lieutenant and a very brave and had some very heroic rescue missions. And so that was interesting. And so right here in Battleship Cove, we're going to have that for hopefully more generations to come. And lastly, I was reading this week about Joe Raposo's, Sesame Street. He was a famous composer born right here. Well, he came here from the Azores, lived here with his family. Santa Cristo Parish, he was a member, and he's the world famous Joe Raposo composer. His son was quoted recently in some articles I read that he and his family come down to Battleship Cove in the summer. He takes his children and has taken them for years. We forget how important a resource the Battleship is, and it does need some tender, loving care. And so the whole community I think should continue to be mindful of that, and we're going to figure out everything we can do to be helpful.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I want to just ask you a couple of items in terms of the budget that is before the House. You mentioned the Ways and Means Committee has released its House version of the budget. One of the things that both states and local communities are trying to work through is the influx of federal stimulus money. Has there been any, indication from what you hear on how the state may want to use some of that money, at least, in the upcoming fiscal year?
Well, a couple of things. You're right. So we just released our $47.6 billion budget, the House did, which is about 3% higher than the governor's House one. And then we'll see what the Senate does. They typically add on as well, because as we move along in this process, we learn more about our revenues, which are showing some very comfortable status right now. We were able in our budget to fund the Student Opportunity Act at 16% and put some finances aside, $40 billion for to see where our enrollment is come October, and that's really important on the education side. And if we need more, I know we'll find it. But as far as the federal stimulus, our 47.6% budget does not account for a penny of the federal money that's coming our way. We do know that around the second week of May, we'll be hearing exactly what we can and cannot use that money for. I think we're going to see a lot more flexibility. And I will tell you, in my role as chair of this committee, as is the role of any committee chair, you want to make sure that the areas that you have keen knowledge on and have needs are funded. And so we are going to come back to a committee which we formed in the House that just addresses this federal money. They're going to be charged with evaluating how we can spend that money. And we will be, I know I'll be looking for some funds from that federal relief for this tourism, arts, cultural development, and I'll add hospitality industry. So stay tuned to that, Keith. We're going to be having, there's going to be a lot of money. The city of Fall River is going to receive millions, about 73 million roughly. We know the school department alone is going to get over 40 million. This is historic funding. We will never see this again. So we're going to all put our heads together to make sure it is spent wisely and where it is needed.
And there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of responsibility. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out. State Representative Carole Fiola, as always, I appreciate your time, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you for joining me.
Keith, thanks. Thank you for inviting me.